Good afternoon, everyone. Let's just give it another minute. I see a lot of attendees still jumping on the call. All right, let's give another 30 seconds and then we'll get started. I still see the numbers climbing up. Hopefully everyone's having a great day. I know I'm probably the last presenter of the day, so you've had your fill of Zoom session today. So I'll try to be quick. I'll try to give you back some time at the end of the day, but hopefully this will be something that's very useful. So with that, let's get started. So again, hello and what's up, cybersecurity defenders? And again, thank you for jumping in to this session. My name is Manny Liwanag. I'm a principal security engineer at Imperva, and I'll be your tour guide for our journey on looking at ransom DDoS, right? I promise to make this session fun, informative, and useful as you assess the risk of DDoS attacks in your organization. Now, in today's session, we're going to talk about ransom DDoS and examine actually 2 ransom notes our customers received. We'll also dive deeper into 2 case studies we have where such attacks actually came into fruition. Now, we love partnering with WCISC, and I've always enjoyed the events that they put up with our large cybersecurity community presence, and I'm actually super excited to be here. And just minimize this. Now, back to the session at hand. The latter part of our session, we're going to bust some myths and common misconceptions about ransom DDoS, and also provide some tips and advice on how to protect your organization. Now, let's hope that none of you get any of these ransom notes in your inbox. But as you know, the great, Vince Lombardi made that famous quote, hope, is not a strategy. Hope only gets you so far, and you cannot just wish your problems away. Let me just click on my next slide here. There you go. Now, ransom in itself is not a new concept, right? Businesses had been hit by ransom for quite some time. And, since September 2020, we witnessed a major global ransom denial of service campaign, mainly against the financial services industry, with the extortionists claiming a connection with that infamous advanced persistent threat group, Fancy Bear, as well as Lazarus Group. As you can see here, Australia's bank has faced ransom demands. Global firms are also being hit with even large cloud providers like AWS are often hit with large-scale DDoS attack. Now, ransom DDoS campaigns, these are extortion-based distributed denial of service threats, really motivated by financial gains, demanding payment, usually in Bitcoin currency, to prevent DDoS attack on their target networks. Now, several of our customers were actually impacted by these types of campaigns. Now, let's examine what a ransom note looks like. The first one here was sent as an email, from Fancy Bear. Now, Fancy Bear is also known as APT28, by Mandiant. It's a Russian espionage, group. Fancy Bear, not Mandiant, actually. Cybersecurity, firm CrowdStrike, I'm sure many of you are familiar with them, has said that, with a medium level of confidence that it's associated with Russian military, intelligence agencies, and other agencies as well as security firms have also said, this group, Fancy Bear, is sponsored by the Russian government, right? So now this particular email was sent to a few individuals in a financial services company. They asked the recipient to actually, Google them and see what types of attacks they've been responsible for, to kind of give them that credibility, right? So, the group actually was threatening them that, a DDoS attack is going to happen in 7 days. And just to prove that this is not a hoax, they also tell them, information about their company's network, and sends, a precursor attack on a few of their IP addresses. Now, typically, this will not cause an outage, but it should still be visible in the customer SIM or dashboard to prove their point. Now, sometimes the ask is small, like 1 Bitcoin. But in this case, the ask was for 20 Bitcoins, which is roughly at that time about $1.1 million, right? And if they miss that deadline, the ransom increases by 10 Bitcoins every day that's they're late. Now, these bad actors give the victims about 7 days to come up with the Bitcoin, as they know, it does take some time to secure the funds, but they also know that, 7 days will not be enough to mount, a defense, to block their DDoS attack campaign. Now, Fancy Bear also, states that they shouldn't try to negotiate, and once they've been paid, they will never attack the network again. Interesting. Our second example actually was also a ransom. This time, it was sent to a gaming company using, a commonly used contact us page, right? This ransom is from someone also claiming to be Fancy Bear. However, if you kind of read through, the notes, right? Let me expand this right here. The content, language, and even the spirit of the notes is kind of completely different, right? This note mentioned that this was not the first time that they contacted them, and that their demand is slightly more modest at 5 Bitcoins. What we can kind of take from this is that ransom is reasonable compared to what the target victim can pay. You notice that it wasn't 20 Bitcoins or even 30 Bitcoins of the previous example. Similar also to the previous example, they too told the victim that they know their network. They'll send a small attack to prove it. And the funny thing about this is that the ransom mentioned that these bad actors are really only there for financial gains, and they're not there for any greater good or hacktivism. Lastly, as well, they too mentioned that no further attacks will happen if they were to pay the ransom, right? So so what's next? After you get the ransom notes, perhaps you quickly start doing some research on where you're vulnerable, parts of your networks. Are you going to maybe wait and see? Perhaps you're thinking, hey, this could be a hoax, or maybe just a spamming campaign. Do I or should I call the authorities? Does my local or even regional authorities have a cybercrime division that can help me? Should I raise the flag internally and alert our executives? Would I be seen as the person who cried wolf if the threats are not legitimate? And lastly, should we outright pay the ransom? So let's take a look at why this is actually quite popular, right? It's DDoS itself. Really, really easy to do. And reason number one is at the entry level to start a DDoS attack is very, very low, right? Yeah, you don't need to be backed by nation states. You don't need sophisticated automation tools. In fact, a lot of DDoS tools are available online and not even on the dark web, right? Some are actually free. Some are low. You can see here monthly subscriptions accepting Bitcoins or PayPal with full enterprise level support. You can even hide yourself, or as you access these resources, through a VPN or Tor networks. And if you're not, familiar with these things, you can actually do a quick, YouTube search, and we'll show you exactly how to set these things up, right? So these tools are actually hugely lucrative business, and that's why there's actually quite a lot of them, right? And this one here, the Quest Stressor, is hugely, hugely popular. Go to the next slide here, right? So really, so if you are, the would-be attacker and now have, those DDoS tools that we had in the previous, slide, what's next, right? How do you find, your target, right? This step is actually even easier than the previous one. And actually, this one is all free. Here's an example of using a Hurricane Electric to find the network ranges. In this case, this is, Encapsula Imperva. Encapsula is now part of Imperva. And I'm showing this here to show you really how easy it is to find all this information, and I'm not really too worried about throwing out our ranges of IP address and so forth here, because, we are protecting our ranges of IP address. But you can also see here, you can also find all the DNS records, subdomain. Really, the world is your oyster as the saying goes. Actually, funny, well, maybe not so funny. I was in a meeting yesterday, and I was a customer, and I popped up Hurricane Electric, and I popped in their domain, and I see they have a huge network and stuff. And I was showing that, yeah, are these the networks that you guys are considering, protecting? And one of the gentlemen came on and said, hey, Zoom is not very secure. You shouldn't be showing these sensitive information out here because, we could get hacked. And I said, given, yes, there are some security issues there, but it's really, really simple for anyone to get this information. That's why DDoS is so popular, right? You don't need a phishing campaign or to, socially engineer someone to have access to internal endpoints, right? You can do this at the drop of a hat, basically, right? So what are these DDoS challenges, right? You may be surprised that, let me just expand all these out here, that 90% of organizations polled experience DDoS in, oops, went a little bit too quick here, in a 12-month period, right? Of these, 91% of them experience downtime, either network outage or web application outage. And typically, it's not one and done. 25% of them were hit 10 times or more with the average cost of an hour downtime of $100,000. All right. So at the end of the day, what does DDoS attack means is really loss of businesses, right? It's has a devastating impact on, say, your brand value to your customers, your business partners, right? When you think about a broken SLA in particular, your revenue and even your stock prices are all impacted, right? It's all aspects of the business are actually impacted, especially if you're relying on having a consistent, reliable web presence to facilitate everything that you do. Also important to remember, the impact of a DDoS attack continues, it continues on long after the actual event is solved. So even if it's just a few minutes or hours of downtime, it can take days or weeks and even months to fully recover from that singular DDoS attack here. Now, Global DDoS Threat Landscape Report, this is something that we provide on our website. It's actually quite free. It's especially important to consider as we see the DDoS attacks are becoming really more sophisticated and complex, with particular increase in applications. So what we call layer 7 types of attacks, against which not all DDoS mitigation vendors really are armed to defend. Obviously, we can talk about that at the end of our presentation, that, we have our world-renowned experts at Imperva, we call them, research lab. And in our latest DDoS threat landscape report published by this group, we analyzed about 46,000 DDoS attacks over the past year. In it, and also in our other research, we put out in the security space, we talked about a 30+ hour attack at 100 to 200 gigabits. We obviously mitigated that. Of course, a record-breaking layer 7 DDoS attack at 292,000 requests per second. And of course, the type of the well-publicized large-scale volumetric attacks that you're used to hearing about, like the whopping 650 million packets per second layer 3 attack that we also, were able to mitigate, in our network. Oops. So these other slides here, you can see here in terms of the longest DDoS attack that we've seen, 690 requests per second. If you go to our websites, you can actually take a look at our CTI score by industry, which is actually, quite cool. All right. So in terms of, the landscape for DDoS, right, as we see becoming more and more, complex, it's really interesting to see, the kinds of attacks that's, that we are seeing out there, right? So in terms of, you really got to be ready, to be prepared for any types of attack vector. It's interesting, the attack vectors that we analyzed in our report and how they ranked in terms of how often they showed up and how difficult or, sometimes easy they were to mitigate here. As you can see in this particular slide here, user data protocol, UDP, was the most popular attack vector in this report, probably because it's easy to spoof. It's employed in virtually all amplification type attacks. Following, came, SYN floods, DNS response, and TCP attacks, all of which are considered to be harder to mitigate. Whereas SSDP, large SYN, and DNS attacks, these are kind of more easily mitigated, were the least popular for particular industries. If you're looking at it that way, financial services, for example, was hit more by SYN floods, 32%, versus all other industries. Let me pop this up here. Okay, yeah. What we see here as well in these slides are the multiple types of attacks happening at the same time, right? So the misunderstanding that we're seeing out there is when businesses is doing a risk assessments, if there's actually a disconnect between the challenge for the attacker and the impact to the customer, right? There was a story on Computer Weekly when pressed, why this person had targeted the banks. This teenager had said, what, they should have their security in order, right? And funny when he says that, because attackers are scanning for vulnerable entry points, right? If they see they can get it, or they can't get it, they move on. But they keep probing anyway, and they're always scanning. And so as soon as your protection is dropped, or perhaps a new site with new vulnerability is added, they can get one small attack in, then they move all their resources to that point and start a flood type attack, right? So the trend observation, if you look at this slide here, right off the bat, smaller in size, shorter in duration, right? For those of you, that may be, thinking, hey, that's a pretty good sign. The attacks aren't as big, they don't last as long, but you know what? They're maybe not doing as much damage, perhaps, but unfortunately, that's not the case at all, right? The problem with DDoS attacks is that they can cause a lot of damage in just a little amount of time, right? Minutes to go down, but effects are, lasting much, much longer, right? So what we've been seeing are attacks, that didn't exceed, 50 million packets per second. The majority of attacks reached no more than, say, 50 gigabits per second, a fact that could be attributed to what I called earlier, those stressors, or those DDoS for hire services, which typically offer unlimited, quick, and small attacks, right? And most networks attacks as well are short in duration too. 51% or less than 15 minutes in length, and between 100 to about 1,000 requests per second. Whereas application layer attacks were also generally small. This makes sense somehow, because since most attackers would really rather not waste time and resources on achieving their proof of impact. And these as I mentioned earlier, these bad actors are applying these multi-level tactics, right? Large scale attacks are often used as typically, these are diversionary techniques used to, overwhelm, security professionals, while the smaller, more targeted attacks are typically going unnoticed, thus maybe allowing a more prolonged attack to the target and, perhaps disabling specific, infrastructure that's kind of below the radar, right? And what these often results in, a slowing of services, perhaps, the service delivery, rather than, a complete shutdown, right? Which is still a very real problem for any company that relies on the internet to do business, right? Slowing, websites response time, intermittently, preventing customers from accessing, your institution's public websites, as well as, adversely affecting, any back office type, operations. Okay, here. As we talked about, you can see, attacks have gotten shorter, but we've actually had some records in terms of attack durations, right? So it's really quite important to still be ready to combat these types of sustained attacks. You can see here, these are the super large and long DDoS attack, the one that's, typically makes it in the news. What we've been seeing actually since 2019, just, pre-pandemic time, and certainly the last 6 months, is DDoS is affecting every customer, whether it's, finance, retail, gaming, schools, small and even large, organizations are being hit, right? We're seeing small is the trend, but large are still real and happening to many organizations. As you can see, layer 3 DDoS, almost 900 gigabits per second. layer 3 DDoS of 30 plus hours, layer 3 DDoS of 650 million packets per second. So these are huge in terms of numbers here. Let me just quickly pause here and see if there's, there's no, see if there was anything in the chat, but no worries there. Okay, so, all right, so let's talk about our first use case, right? This was an international money moving company. They contacted us at the beginning of the year as, they read we were the leader in the DDoS protection from the Forrester report. DDoS protection was something they targeted as part of their audit and risk mitigation program. We worked with them to set up what we call a proof of value, but they got sidetracked. There were other what they refer to as kind of top line projects, and the DDoS initiative was basically, it was put in the back burner for now, right? Then in August, they got a ransom note. I shouldn't laugh, but they got a ransom note from Lazarus Group. Now, the Lazarus Group is also a cybercrime group with strong links to North Korea. One of their claim to fame was the Sony data breach about 6 years ago, where they accessed previously unreleased movies, films, emails, and personal information, I think of about 4,000 employees, right? Now, this ransom, it gave them 6 days to pay. Once the attack has started, a payment of 30 Bitcoin, they say, we'll stop it, right? With an additional, 10 Bitcoin, roughly about 110,000 US dollars, demanded for each day that the ransom, remain unpaid, right? I think that should be 2 Bitcoin, because I think a Bitcoin is like 55,000, dollars in terms of that. And the extortionists, they were like threatened, to begin a small DDoS, campaign attack against the company's main IP address to kind of prove that, it wasn't a hoax, right? These precursor attacks, happened 2 days after that ransom note was sent, and really was not supposed to take down their network, but it actually did, right? As you can imagine what happened next, they gave us a call. They said, hey, do you guys still have, the contract? What can you do to set this up as they're under attack? Keep in mind that with, Imperva's automation, we already had everything set up on our end from previous engagements with them. So all they need to do was make, an advertisement change on their routers. Now, since they're under attack, unfortunately, they were down and can't really remote into their routers whatsoever, right? If they change their routers, and they're not able to push out new configurations. So luckily for them, they had actually an engineer who lived near the data center and was able to go in and basically console into their routers and use the new configuration we gave them. And in minutes after adding the new configuration, basically BGP propagates, the attack traffic was diverted all to Imperva Cloud, and we were able to scrub it, and now only clean traffic again was flowing to their network, right? So what did this do? Well, they had a total of 6 hours of downtime, a total of they said about 50 engineers, director level folks, plus C-level folks on the bridge. They're constantly asking for updates. What's going on? When are we going back online? Because this was absolutely crucial to their business. And at the end, this customer, came back to us. They estimated the outage cost them about $600,000, right? And again, if you look at the chart, you can see the size of attack at over 13 million packets per second is as high as 115 gigabits, per second. Okay. Now this one is from an entertainment company. Now they did not have any DDoS protection, and what they noticed was that they were getting actually proxy errors and could not reach, their web application orders. So they, dove a little bit deeper, and in their investigation, they showed that they were not receiving any packets whatsoever at all in their origin servers, right? They did more triaging, not even sure if that's a word, but I'm going to go with it anyway, and troubleshooting, and finally contacted their ISP. That's actually when they found out that their ISP had pushed out a new policy to boot them out of their network, right? Basically null routing now. Now this customer was not delinquent whatsoever in their payments to the ISP, and was curious as to why they got tossed from their network, right? The ISP said that the IPs, the ranges that the customer had a huge increase in traffic and noise, which was affecting the ISP's network and neighboring customers. So it was policy to always null routes these noisy neighbors, right? So, this action by the ISP, of course, helped out the attackers by shutting down the services to the victim in both good and bad traffic. This ransom note also was ignored by this group here. It actually came from Fancy Bear, and outage lasted 12 hours. 39 engineers, directors, C-level folks, again on the bridge. Lots of panic and despair for sure. With this one, they had 30-minute status call updates, during that outage, and similar to the last one, they said that direct damage was, in excess of, $600,000. Okay. Next slide here. So here is the DDoS paradox, if I can speak. The cost to enable an attack really, really, really low, as I've shown you earlier, and the cost to actually defend the attack and the subsequent damage is really, really high. So how do you defend against this kind of asymmetric type warfare, right? So first, let's talk about the myths about DDoS ransom attacks, right? So let's talk about the myths that are out there. Myth number one: pay and they will go away, right? Now, if we were dealing with legitimate businesses, then perhaps this would be true. Plus there could be some sort of course of action if the attacker reneged on their word, right? Unfortunately, we are dealing with criminals, right? What we've seen with our customers who have paid is that they are again attacked, but on subsequent attacks, the ransom note came from a different cyber criminal group. Myth number two. Okay, my ISP is going to protect me, right? So this may be partially true, but our experience with customers is that after a certain threshold of attack traffic traversing the ISP, then the customer is going to get eventually null routed, because ISPs typically are not in the business of security, and the solution to prevent and mitigate these large volumetric attacks are not necessarily at par with industry-leading vendors like Imperva, for example. Also, you need to basically read the SLA and make sure that kind of matches what your business needs are. Oftentimes, the SLAs of those 5 nines for network uptime are confused when DDoS attacks actually are happening. Let's go to myth number 3. So my cloud provider will take care of it, whether it's AWS, whether it's GCP, Azure, or other private clouds. You really need to understand what their SLAs are. Now, these organizations are not typically well versed in handling security, though they have them, most generic and not sophisticated to handle these complex attack vector. If you do a quick Google search, you're going to reveal that cloud providers have had network outages from DDoS attacks, right? The second one here, my system can handle or scale the load. While it's true that some of our customers have architected their system to be able to handle large bursts of traffic, they really forget to look at what the bottleneck may be, right? That's bandwidth. If it's on premise, they may have multiple 10 gig lines from multiple providers, but as you saw in the examples, that volumetric attacks can be in excess of hundreds of gigabits per second. If your system is in a cloud, it has elasticity, great. Then that would be, fantastic as it expands. But the cost of ingress traffic going to your application, it just rises, exponentially during an attack. And unfortunately, so does, your cost. Myth number 4. My on-premise mitigation solution is enough. Certainly not the case, and we have lots of customers, examples, as proof points. On-premise appliance may have enough capacity, but the bandwidth of these appliances are typically the bottleneck. Now, some have what we call a hybrid solution of an on-prem, then they go to the cloud to mitigate the DDoS if certain threshold is met. While this sounds like a good compromise, in practice, it's actually easily defeated with what we call pulse attacks. Myth number 5, lastly, the attackers, they don't know my infrastructure, right? Absolutely false, as I showed you earlier. Your infrastructure, unless it doesn't traverse the internet, will easily be seen with a few minutes of little research. Okay, so let's talk about the do's and don'ts of ransom DDoS, right? So we've seen that paying the ransom is not a guarantee to stop these present or future attack, right? Now, we suggest that you kind of don't wait until you're hit by DDoS attack, right? You should really have a mitigation plan in place. Try not to underestimate, what the bad actors out there know about your infrastructure. Perhaps talk to your ISP and see what protection they offer, and don't kind of blindly rely on them, right? And lastly, don't think that these, cyber criminals won't come back. As you can see, a lot of them keep coming back because they know that, you're probably not prepared for that next attack. So on the do side, we suggest, take these threats seriously when you get notified, right? Take a look at your existing tools to see if there's any anomalies or signs of breach or compromise. You really should assess your business risk. What can you afford to go down, right? Start looking at your mitigation strategy. If you don't have one, then this event should really accelerate that process. And if you do have one, perhaps review that playbook with your team and executives and maybe do a dry run, right? You should also be alerting the authorities and your executives. And, last but not least, you got to act immediately. Don't wait, for that note, to come until you do anything. Okay. So if you do not have, you don't have, a mitigation plan, or, you're not presently reviewing your existing plan, then, if you look at these 4 factors, these are the kind of things that should be top of mind, right? So mitigation time, do I want an always-on solution to block attacks in, say, 3 seconds or less, or can I have a small outage in an on-demand type scenario for my DDoS solution? Visibility as well as accuracy are hugely important. I want to be able to report to our C-level folks the attacks that we are blocking, and these attacks are real and not false positives, right? Operation efficiency talks about, not really breaking the bank. That's the proposed solution costs so much financially and in human resources, or FTE, that it makes, a very difficult decision to move to that particular solution to mitigate DDoS attacks. Okay, just grab a little water. What we've been constantly, finding from analyzing, current DDoS threat landscape is that, the ultimate case for really a cloud-based mitigation solution, right? In particular, we've seen greater attack trends on, I mentioned, short, persistent attacks that can outsmart that hybrid DDoS solution, right? I mentioned about the pulse attack, or, as a small attack that could saturate your on-premise solution, then you go to the cloud, then it's gone again, and then you come back. This is what really the chart here on the right talks about or looks at in terms of a pulse attack. So hybrid solution, while it sounds great, it's really can get overwhelmed and not necessarily the best solution out there. With us, obviously, our 3-second SLA is leading the industry. Our last slide here, I'm going to give you back some time unless there's any questions in terms of what we can do in terms of full protection, right? We give you full protection from the edge against DDoS attacks today. We offer our comprehensive cloud-based approach with our DDoS protection. All of your assets, whether they're on-premise or in the cloud, whether you're hosted in AWS or Azure or GCP, we can protect you from any kind of a DDoS attack. That's going to be seamless to you, easy to manage, as well as with a security console where you're seeing all this information, right? So protecting the layer 7 with our DDoS protection. We can protect DNS, your domain name servers. Actually, now with our new products, we're actually able to host your DNS as well. We talked about today mostly on the network side, and that's something that's we're seeing quite a lot of. Again, industry-leading vendor. We have 2 different flavors. You can do an always-on or an on-demand flavor of network DDoS. And last but not least, if you don't have a Class C, a /24 IP address range that you're managing, but you have a handful of individual IP address, we're able to provide you protection for that as well. And that's something that's a self-service. That's something that we can easily set up. That is all I think I wanted to present to you. I hope that's see if there's any questions in the chat. I'm not seeing anything in there. Okay, so with that, if there's no questions, if you have some questions later on, you can certainly reach out to us. You can reach out to me. You can either call me on my mobile or send me an email. But just wanted to thank you for your time. And I know, like I said, this was the last presentation of the day. I wanted to be quick and be impactful to you guys, in terms of, what we're seeing in DDoS protection. But let me see some questions. Cloud service. Is it a cloud? So our solution, is it a cloud service or appliance solution? It's a cloud service, right? So we've got 48 global points of presence that can mitigate attack traffic. Is it licensed by net? So it's actually licensed, yeah, by the number of networks that you may have, how many Class Cs, for example, that you may have, and the clean bandwidth that typically runs to that environment, right? So whether that is you have a 1 gig pipe and you're only using 40 percent of that, and that would be it. So we don't count attack traffic, because sometimes attack traffic could be 600-700 gigs and stuff like that. And so yeah, we'll mitigate that, we'll clean it, and clean traffic only to your origin server. And actually also too, it's a CDN, so it's a content delivery network. So certain aspects of that traffic can be enhanced. I am not seeing any other questions. Well, like I said, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much, and have yourself a great rest of your day, and enjoy the day tomorrow. Bye-bye for now. Thank you.